Welcome back to the Corner of Main and Gervais. My guest today, Neil Mellon from South Carolinians for the Responsible Government Foundation. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
All right, welcome. You came out with a what many would say is a snooze fest, a funding analysis research paper, which actually, if you get into it, is fascinating. Basically what you do here, without using any opinions, is debunk the myth that South Carolina has an education funding crisis.
Ask yourself, how is it that a classroom with 20 or 30 kids, and each kid's being funded at over $11,000 each, how is it that that budget can't pay for a teacher and classroom supplies and everything else they need? And the answer is, it must be going somewhere else. The money is clearly not going to the classroom, and we know that that's not the case, and that's not our analysis. That's the analysis of the state, which says less than half the money is going to
44% goes to the classroom, which is very low compared to other states. That's what you had in here. Now, I do want to say, for full disclosure purposes, you all are a right-leaning, you're a school choice group, but you don't have any recommendations in this report. This is just a straight analysis. I want to get that out. And it brings up another specific question. Nick Zase, the superintendent, chose not to take that supplemental stimulus money. I guess it was about 6 weeks ago. It made a huge uproar. Every other state took the money except for him. It wasn't even money that had to be paid back. And yet it was fascinating because earlier you were telling me that if we had taken the money, it might have actually lowered our overall funding?
Right. Well, so as I was telling you before, there's about 211 this last year separate ways in which schools get money, whether that's a certain law, a tax, a proviso, a regulation. And each one of those individual funding sources, whether it's a local, a state, or a federal, has its own calculator of how much money gets sent and where.
So it's a massive bureaucracy of
But there's also an accounting burden for every one of those. And so often it's the case that when you get more money in, the long-term burden of building out the infrastructure to absorb, spend, and process it, not only in the case of that money do we know that it was never going to reach the classroom because it was sent to do something else, but it would actually end up building out what we'd call an annualized long-term expense in the additional infrastructure and bureaucracy.
It sounds like a cancerous tumor that it just keeps getting bigger and growing out.
It's funny because it is that chaotic, complicated way in which we fund the schools that results in this incredible organizational inefficiency in how the money gets to teachers and students. There's still a lot of specific examples where people superintendents or school boards make really bad, underinformed, and inefficient decisions. And there are numerous examples of that.
But you would find that across the nation.
Sure, right.
So there's obviously something systemically wrong. But it also brings up the final point that I wanted to ask you is I looked at all of the per pupil spending for every state in the nation. Now, we're 23rd, so we're above average. There was absolutely no correlation between the spending per pupil and where the students in that state or how they did on test scores. I couldn't find any.
Yeah, there's never been a correlation ever between the amount of money total, the amount of money per classroom, or any input in student outcomes. Never been. And this is much to the detriment of the folks who just say, we need more money for education, and then sort of walk away thinking that everything else will fall in place. If you're really interested in academic outcomes, your challenge is a lot harder because you have to say, here's how we're going to get there, rather than if you're interested in organizational inputs, you can say taxpayers need to give me more money, and then somehow that becomes an end in itself. The things that make for improvements in student achievement are much more complex and do not come from within this system. But it's not the kind of thing where we can just continue to throw more money.
You can't pass a law which says I mandated this.
And ironically, it is the more of those laws passed at the state and federal level, and then they're either
the deeper we get into this, right?
Right, that often work against whatever our outcome goals are.
Neil, thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me.
I've never seen a paper on money so fascinating.
Appreciate that.
Thanks so much. We'll be right back.